This is Cody J Leach. I live at 308 Negra Arroyo Lane. To all copyright enforcement entities, this is not an admission of guilt. I'm talking to my subscribers now. I know October is for horror. There's a show that you're going to come to learn from me in the next few days. No matter how it looks, just know that I always had you in my heart. Goodbye. Welcome everybody to the Breaking Bad review series. It is Breaking Bad week, all week long on this channel in anticipation and celebration of El Camino coming out on Netflix this Friday, or very, very late Thursday if I don't contain myself. But 5 seasons of Breaking Bad. I'm gonna give a review for every individual season every day this week, and then eventually review El Camino on Friday. So excited. I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys know now, this is basically gonna be a week-long blowfest of this show. I will get into some things here and there on a few seasons that bugged me, or things that I think that could have been better, or things that still I don't feel was 100% perfect, but this is a 5 out of 5 show all day long for me. Every single one of these seasons is gonna be 5 out of 5. I've rewatched this show at least 6 or 7 times. I've almost lost count how much I've watched Breaking Bad. It's my favorite show of all time. Walter White, Bryan Cranston, favorite TV character of all time. I love this show. I think that it's absolutely perfect. I think that it's perfection personified. There's not a wasted moment on the entire show. Even episodes like Fly, wait till season 3, and I'll give you my reasons why Fly is actually brilliant. Nonetheless, Breaking Bad season 1. I don't know really how structured these reviews are going to be too. Might just be talking fluidly. I might be talking randomly about things as I remember them about the season, but as much as I want to say these are going to be reviews, it's a lot of just celebration of this show. So, starting off with Breaking Bad season 1, we're introduced to all of these great characters. You get introduced to Walter White. He's this chemistry professor at a high school. He gets diagnosed with lung cancer, immediately turns to a life of crime because he wants to gain money fast for his family for his impending death. I mean, that's a premise that anybody can get behind. You know, there's people that might have problems with jumping onto a show that's about drug dealing, but when you put that premise in front of it, a family man that turns to a life of crime to secure his family's future for his death, I mean, that's just instant sympathy and such an interesting premise to explore, and my God, do they explore that throughout this series. You get introduced to Aaron Paul playing Jesse Pinkman, who is probably the character that has the biggest arc as far as just how many ups and downs this character goes throughout this series. Skyler as his wife, we'll discuss her. She's a very complicated character to try to latch down your feelings on. His brother-in-law, Hank, who at times seems like that guy that just never shuts up, the guy that always has the crude joke, but then just becomes this badass, genius DEA agent. You get the son, Walter Jr., who is probably the least important character and like the least relevant character to this show. There's moments when you definitely need his character and his character shines, but for the most part, he's the one that has the least to do with the overall plot. But there's times when we need to talk about Walter Jr. You get his sister-in-law, Jesus Christ, Marie. Again, that's a character who she has moments that is very relevant to the show, but for the most part, she's one of the more kind of background characters. And we'll get into more side characters that get introduced throughout this series. But as far as season 1, this is really where Walter is facing his own mortality. This is a guy, and they show you from the opening scenes of this show, whenever he wakes up and, you know, he's doing this little exercise that you kind of have to do when you're in your 50s, and he's coughing, and you see the Nobel Prize on the side of his wall showing you that this guy is a genius and he could have done so much more, but he's just this, you know, blue collar guy that goes to work every day at a high school for a bunch of dickhead kids that'll scrape their chair across the floor. And that in and of itself kind of explains the entire mental state of Walter White, and where a lot of the motivations for the things that he does for the next 5 seasons comes from, is this regret. And that's a big theme in season 1, is this regret. He gets, you know, finds out about his cancer diagnosis. He barely even has a reaction to it. He's just like, oh, of course I have cancer. Everything else in my life has gone to shit. He's got, you know, a wife that's pregnant with a baby they didn't plan. He's got a kid with cerebral palsy. They never quite get into 100% what happened, but they give you just enough to come up with your own interpretations of what happened with this gray matter company that he helped found and then left, and they became this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, and he gets relegated to teach in high school chemistry. All of this regret, all of this hits to his pride, where he knows he could have done so much more and just made all of the wrong choices, really just leads into his choice to, fine, I'm dying, now I'm taking control of my life, I'm doing whatever the fuck I want to do, I'm riding that danger zone, and I'm gonna go for it to get what I need for my family before I leave this earth, because I've wasted my life up to this point in certain aspects.
Big boy pants! What are you doing?
What's wrong, Chief? Having a little trouble walking?
And Bryan Cranston, man, like, this is a guy that, of course, we've seen him in like Malcolm in the Middle. You've seen him in, like, you know, he'll show up in an X-Files episode. He was never really a big name until Breaking Bad. And this show showcased all of that guy's acting talent. And he's become one of my favorite actors of all time. He's become one of the biggest names. He's like A-list at this point, because you get a role like Lex Luthor, everybody's like, Bryan Cranston should play that. If you had that question before Breaking Bad started, that name would never come up. And he is the heart and soul of this show, you know, all of the light and all of the dark. And he is the one that really just kind of makes you latch into this character, and this story is just how brilliant this guy is at bringing this character to life, getting the sympathy, showing the emotion of the situation. And there's times when he'll be really mean and really evil and really vile, and there's times whenever you can just see the pain in his eyes, and it's all from Bryan Cranston's performance. You get into Aaron Paul and Jesse Pinkman, and this is a character that you have this brilliant chemistry, no pun intended, between Bryan Cranston's character of Walt and Jesse, where Jesse used to be this high school student. He was the fuck up. He was the one that Walt was constantly pushing, like, apply yourself, do more, you can do more. Why are you settling for, you know, 68% on a test? And then Jesse gets yanked and literally blackmailed into this situation to where he has to help Walt cook crystal meth and get into this meth business. And it's almost like the student and that teacher role gets very blurred, because while Walt is very chemistry brilliant and he can make the best crystal meth that's ever been made, Jesse has all the street smarts, and he knows how the business works, and he knows how the connections work, and he knows what you can and can't do, and what's smart and what's not smart. And there's that constant battle for control, which goes throughout a lot of seasons, but in season 1 is very heavy because Bryan Cranston and Walt is just so ignorant to this business, and that ego is starting to show through. And in season 1, Walt's ego really makes him and Jesse learn everything the hard way. This is the season where they fuck up left and right. Everything that they try to do, they hit this wall, and they go 1 step forward and 9 steps backwards with every single step of this meth building business that they're trying to do, where you have 2 guys that get killed on the pilot, and you have the second episode where Jesse, and this is where Jesse's ignorance as a student really starts to show a lot of comedic value, where he puts the dude in the tub and puts acid all over him and it just blows through his floor. That was the scene when I was immediately hooked on this show, and just guts started coming down on the floor, and he's like, oh yeah, that thing that I asked you to buy. I was like, I love this show. So that was the moment for me. But you get into their business with Tuco. Whenever Walt is just pushing, we have to do more. You know, we need to get more. This is not enough money for the risk that I'm taking. And they get involved with Tuco, who is one of the great like Hispanic character actors, because you've seen him in movies like Training Day, you see him in other things where he shows up. And now anytime he shows up, I just think Tuco. Tight, 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 tight.
Beat the piss out of your mule boy. And then you walk in here and you bring me more, man? Woo, it's a brilliant plan, isn't it? Brilliant.
And it's Walt's meeting of Tuco that is probably my favorite episode of this season, Crazy Handful of Nothing, but it's also the birth of Heisenberg. And this is where Walt is really full on his path to evil. Like, this is the point when he full on transfers into the character and the mindset of Heisenberg, and it's so badass. Like, this isn't to the point where you start to lose any sympathy or you start to kind of raise your eyebrows at Walt at any point. There's one moment of morality that I'll get into in a second regarding Walt this season, but you're still full on with Walt and with Jesse this season. Jesse gets the shit beat out of him by Tuco. They get their meth stolen. He doesn't get the money. Walt's losing his hair at this point. And you're wondering, like Jesse's the one who's kind of in the underbelly of this business. Walt is the silent partner, and this is the first time where Walt makes him the front of their business. Goes to find Tuco, comes in with another bag of meth, or so it seems, and basically talks calmly and saying, look, you're gonna pay me the money that you owe me, you're gonna pay for my partner's suffering, and you're also going to give me extra. And Tuco naturally laughs, acts like things are all cool, you know, you brought me more meth to steal, and you get that brilliant scene where Heisenberg is born and the badass of Walter White comes out for the first time.
You got one part of that wrong. This is not meth.
And you can see in the scene whenever he leaves that wreckage, whenever he leaves that meeting and he's full on Heisenberg and gets into his car and he's like yelling and he's pumped up, that's one of these moments where Walt begins to feel alive. And by the end of the series, you realize, because he says it himself, that's what this whole thing is about. It's like all this risk, all this danger, all this death and destruction that he brings in 5 seasons. It's his way of feeling alive while facing his own mortality, which is the big theme of a lot of the show, but predominantly in season 1, is just facing death head on and saying, no. Now, the one moment of morality, and again, brilliant acting by Bryan Cranston that you do get in this season, is the episode whenever he comes to the point where he has to decide whether he's going to let Crazy 8 go or kill Crazy 8. He's the one who survived the pilot. I believe it's episode 3 at this point, where he's got him locked with a bike lock to this pole in the basement, which is like a random pole. I don't know how many basements have poles, but nonetheless, he's sitting there, and through this entire episode, he kind of gains sympathy for this character, Crazy 8, who tried to murder him a couple episodes ago. You know, they're talking about their family, and he starts to realize that, you know, this kid, this Crazy 8, is the child of the man who sold him his bassinet to whenever he had his first child, Walt Jr., and there's all these things where he starts to realize this is a person, and starts to realize that there's family there, and even though he's a drug dealer, and, you know, he was a murderer, or was going to be a murderer, or possibly has murdered a lot of people, that there's this person there. And he comes this close to letting him go and realizes that he's holding a piece of that broken plate, and he plans to attack Walt. And it's such a great exchange that happens, because when he finds out, he's like, no, why are you doing this? I was gonna let you go. Why are you making me do this? And you see the pain in Walter White's eyes whenever he goes and he grabs the bike lock, and he's like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if he's gonna back down or if he's gonna freak out. And when you have that scene, it just goes to shit, and he actually has to physically murder the first person, aside from the self-defense murder of the pilot, to actually make the choice to take somebody's life. You just feel the pain and the regret in Walter White.
The moment I do, Are you gonna stick me with that broken piece of plate?
And it might be the only time in this series where you truly feel that, because that slowly starts to diminish from season 1 all the way through to the end. And it's just one of those times when you look at it and you're like, where has Bryan Cranston been all of this time? Because every emotion that Walter White feels in that scene, you feel as a viewer.
I'm so sorry.
Another element of this season that I absolutely enjoy the hell out of is as they are kind of figuring out what they're gonna do with this meth business, they come up with these scientific, or at least Walt does, comes up with these scientific solutions to the problem. Like whenever they start running out of pseudo, oh, we'll just switch over to a P2P cook. Or, you know, what are we gonna do with Tuco? I'll just fulminate some mercury and go in and I basically have a living bomb that looks like meth. And you get into the scene whenever they have to rob the methylamine and he has to take the little Etch-a-Sketch and he teaches Jesse about thermite and goes back to like World War I or World War II and a story about how thermite was created, and they rob the methylamine using this thermite and then hilariously look like idiots as they're carrying this barrel out that could easily just roll their way out. It's an element of this season that we don't really revisit until the final season, and I'll definitely get into it whenever I get into season 5, but I just love that element in this season where Jesse's the street smart one. Jesse knows what they have to do, but every time they hit one of these typical problems that you hit in this meth business, Walt's chemistry knowledge and history knowledge just comes in to save the day, and it's like, yeah, Mr. White, science! And you also have to talk about how great of an introduction this season is to Jesse as just a solo character. Yes, the relationship between him and Walt is the heartbeat of the show, and that's where a lot of the drama comes from through these 5 seasons. But this season, you really get to know him as far as where he stands with his family, where he's kind of the outcast in this proper kind of wealthy family. You got the younger brother who's like the prodigy of the family and yet does some of the same things that Jesse does, but his parents just won't see it. You have where he's trying to go off on his own and he's trying to be, suddenly he's pushed by the level of quality that Walt has brought forth in his meth cook, to where now he's trying to push to that point where it took cooking meth for Walt to finally get him to understand the meaning of apply yourself. And then just the drama of these two trying to figure out these business together. And it's funny enough that originally Aaron Paul was supposed to be killed in this first season. I don't know if maybe Tuco was supposed to beat him to death in the finale. I don't know the exact details of when he was supposed to die or if it was the pilot possibly, but Jesse originally was not supposed to be a part of this show, and that's such a wild thing to think about. Breaking Bad without Jesse. Breaking Bad without the relationship between Walt and Jesse. I have no idea what that show would even look like, because that's the show. And it's one of those great miracles of storytelling that they saw, and acting, that they saw the potential in the character, and they saw the potential in Aaron Paul, who again was a nobody and then come on to be this multi-Emmy winner, that they decided to keep the character of Jesse around because he's equally as important as Walt in a lot of ways. This is not an issue for me personally, but the one thing that I will say about season 1 is that this is the only season of the show that has this tone. Like, there's a very dark comedy edge to season 1.
I said, fuck you and your eyebrows. Wipe down this.
There's some very dark, evil, vile things that happen in this, like the guts falling through the roof, but it's done in a comedic way where you're almost laughing at it. And there's certainly moments of that throughout the series, but the tone that this series really captures and holds onto, and the tension that it goes for, and just how dark it gets, really isn't present in season 1. I still love season 1 for what it is, and I think it's absolutely necessary to start with this tone and build to what the show eventually becomes, but I do understand that there are some people that have watched this show that don't quite get sucked into season 1 the way that some of us get sucked into it, and the way they would probably get sucked into further seasons. So that's the one thing that I will say is like an asterisk, because I've even had people who have watched the show and they're like, I don't know, I got like 4 or 5 episodes into season 1, it wasn't really grabbing me, and I'm always like, stick through and at least watch through season 2. If you don't like it by then, fair enough, you're just crazy, I guess. But season 1 definitely stands on its own with this tone, and the show didn't quite know what it was yet, but it was still brilliant. Like I said, these seasons are all pretty much 5 out of 5 for me, but we'll go through the motions anyway. So all in all, guys, season 1 of Breaking Bad is this great introduction to this character of Walter White, the relationship with him and Jesse, this meth cook business that they're going to be going through, this facing his mortality, this storyline about an everyday man facing his own mortality and having to descend himself into the criminal world for what he sees as his only option to gain the security for his family. It's the start of my favorite show of all time. Yes, there's a bit more of a dark comedic edge to this season, but I still think that it's brilliant all the way through and really just kind of introduces you to a lot of elements and tones and directions that they're gonna take this series through the next 4 seasons through to the end of Breaking Bad, the greatest show of all time. So if you guys want a brilliant story and a brilliant character to latch yourself into and you want to see what all the buzz has been about with Breaking Bad, definitely check this thing out and go out and buy it. So what do you guys think of Breaking Bad Season 1? Is this your favorite show of all time? Are you on the end that just does not get it? Lindsay. What is your favorite episode this season? Do you think season 1 is the weakest of the show, or are you somebody that actually preferred the dark comedic edge that the first season had and that got a little bit too dark and serious for you later on? Put all of your thoughts on Breaking Bad season 1 down below, guys. Keep your eyes peeled for tomorrow and the rest of this week as we continue through this series for the release of El Camino this Friday. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of it. Like and share this video. Check the video description below for social media links like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My Teespring store just below that, which has all of my merchandise, all of the designs by Woody Bowen. I've got 31 on 31 designs down there. I've got the Top Stream logo down there for some new designs. So check that out down below, guys. And my Patreon page, which is a great way to give back to this channel, help this channel grow, and get cool exclusive content for your eyes only if you decide to become a patron. So check all that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, including the rest of this Breaking Bad series review, you can check those out by clicking right over here.